Paris, 10 Thermidor, Year 2, July 28, 1794, Hôtel de Ville. Just after 2 a.m., a storm rages. Inside the Hôtel de Ville, the heart of the Jacobins nears its final chapter. Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just, the revolution's angel of death, sits utterly still, eerily calm. Georges Couthon, paralyzed and helpless, Philippe Lebas's hands tremble. Augustin Robespierre nervously paces, jaw clenched, eyes darting to the windows. And at the center of it all, slumped in his chair, exhausted, and his voice ragged from his desperate pleas to the members of the committee, sits Maximilien Robespierre, once feared, once revered, now vilified and disgraced. Once leaders of the revolution, they have been declared outlaws. Lebas pulls out 2 pistols. He hands one silently to Robespierre. Downstairs, men are shouting and charging up the stairs. The door crashes open. Paul Barras and his grenadiers have arrived. Augustine throws open a window. "I'd rather die than be taken," then leaps into the dark. Lebas turns his pistol on himself and pulls the trigger. Saint-Just remains unfazed. Couthon begins to crawl, dragging himself toward the stairs. Robespierre raises the pistol, aims it at his own mouth. A grenadier lunges to stop him. To his supporters, he was the Incorruptible, the voice of the people, an unwavering force for justice and champion of virtue. To his enemies, he was the architect of terror, a fanatical tyrant wielding the guillotine blade. Driven by zealous virtue, kings, queens, rivals, and even friends fell victim to his wrath. This is the story of Maximilien Robespierre, the revolutionary leader whose quest to liberate France unleashed a reign of terror. History's most infamous figures, Part 6. Before the guillotine, before the revolution, before he became the most feared man in France, Maximilien Robespierre was born on May 6, 1758, in Arras, the eldest child of lawyer François Robespierre and Jacqueline Carreau. When he was 6, his mother died in childbirth. The loss shattered the family. His father vanished, leaving behind 4 children to be raised by relatives, with Maximilien and his brother Augustine separated from their sisters. This trauma stiffened his sense of discipline and duty and forged a deep contempt for weakness. When he was 11, he earned a scholarship to the Lycée Louis le Grand in Paris. There, his mind was shaped by Enlightenment ideals, and he became obsessed with virtue and Roman morality. Rousseau, Cicero, and Plutarch, ideas of republican virtue and moral rigor, took hold. To Augustin, his older brother became his hero, an ideal to live up to. It was also where he would meet his close friend and future revolutionary Camille Desmoulins. At 17, he was handpicked to give a welcoming speech to King Louis XVI himself, forced to praise the very monarch who represented everything he would one day seek to destroy. After studying law at the Sorbonne, Robespierre returned to Arras in 1780 and quickly built a reputation for principle and precision. He didn't drink, chase women, or joke. He wore plain clothes, refused bribes, and treated the law as sacred. He defended the voiceless, attacked despotism, and stood firm where others bent. He denounced lettres de cachet, royal arrest warrants issued without trial, Roman virtue, Spartan discipline. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a crusader. In 1783, he joined the Academy of Arras, delivering fiery speeches on justice, patriotism, and moral virtue. He wrote essays, poems, and pamphlets critiquing the monarchy. On paper, he was just a lawyer. In spirit, he was already preparing for revolution. He wasn't alone. Camille Desmoulins, his old school friend, shared his ideals. If Robespierre was the voice of virtue, Desmoulins was the voice of fire. Their friendship would become one of the most vital and tragic relationships of the revolution. By the late 1780s, France was unraveling. Bankrupted from aiding the American Revolution and racked by food shortages, bread prices soared, and the people were growing restless. The First and Second Estates, clergy and nobility, lived in luxury, while the Third Estate, the the people bore the tax burden. Desperate to prevent collapse, King Louis XVI called the Estates General for the first time in 175 years, a national assembly of all three estates. Each region would elect its deputies. Robespierre saw an opportunity, not for power, but for justice. He ran to represent Artois. He didn't promise wealth, he promised reform. In April 1789, the people elected him. At 30, he set off for Versailles, unknown, determined. Robespierre was about to step onto the national stage, and history was about to catch up to him. When Robespierre arrived at Versailles in May 1789, he was one of 578 deputies elected to the Estates General, a body that hadn't convened since 1614. Meant to resolve France's growing crises, bankruptcy, famine, and unrest, it only revealed how deep the rot ran. The Estates General was divided into three estates: the First Estate, the clergy, the Second Estate, the nobility, and the Third Estate, the people. Even though the Third Estate represented over 95% of the population, each estate had one vote, ensuring that the clergy and nobility could always overrule the people. This time, the Third Estate demanded real change, equal representation, tax reform, and constitutional rights. Among their ranks was Maximilien Robespierre. He was not the loudest or most famous, but he was focused, incorruptible, and relentless. He called for universal male suffrage, freedom of the press, and legal equality for all. On June 17th, after weeks of deadlock, the Third Estate broke away and declared itself the National Assembly, the true voice of France. Robespierre stood with them, swearing the tennis court oath. They would not disband until France had a constitution. His rise was quiet but steady. He spoke relentlessly in the assembly, calling for justice, equality, and meritocracy. Pamphlets spread his speeches, radical clubs repeated his arguments. In Arras, he was hailed as a hero. In Versailles, he became a force. Outside, tensions soared as food shortages spiraled. On July 11th, King Louis XVI dismissed Jacques Necker, the finance minister viewed as a rare ally of the people. To the people of Paris, it was clear the monarchy would never change. Revolution was no longer a question. It was a matter of when. 3 days later, the people erupted. On July 14th, 1789, a mob stormed the Bastille, the medieval prison and symbol of royal tyranny. They freed 7 prisoners, seized weapons, and killed the governor, placing his head on a pike. Inside the assembly, Robespierre watched the future he had imagined come to life, not as a coup, but as a popular uprising. He rose to speak, quietly, forcefully, defending the people's right to revolt. Liberty, he insisted, was not granted by kings, it was seized by citizens. The French Revolution had begun. In the days following the storming of the Bastille, power shifted from the monarchy to the streets. Paris became a city of barricades and armed citizens. The National Guard was formed, commanded by the Marquis de Lafayette, hero of the American Revolution and principal author of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Robespierre wasn't in the streets, but he was rising fast inside the National Assembly. While Lafayette and the moderates sought compromise with the crown, Robespierre pushed further. No noble titles, no feudal dues, no corruption, only true liberty. By late 1789, the revolution was spreading. Desmoulins' writings fanned the flames in the countryside. Peasants ransacked manors. In October, women marched on Versailles demanding bread and forced the royal family back to Paris as virtual prisoners in the Tuileries palace. Through it all, Robespierre remained consistent. Reform must be absolute and justice universal. He joined the Jacobin Club. Once a moderate forum, it became the beating heart of radical reform. Alongside Desmoulins, Georges Danton, and Jean-Paul Marat, Robespierre championed universal male suffrage, freedom of the press, the abolition of slavery, and, ironically, the end of the death penalty. Outside the assembly, his speeches were printed in pamphlets. His following grew in the working-class districts, among the sans-culottes, the artisans and laborers who wore long pants instead of silk breeches. It was among them that Robespierre's legend began. He wasn't charismatic like Danton. He didn't thunder like Marat, but he believed every word and lived what he preached. That authenticity made him powerful and dangerous, because revolutions don't reward virtue alone. They reward power, and Robespierre was learning how to wield it. conflict. By 1790, Maximilien Robespierre had outgrown his provincial roots. His voice now moved mobs and unsettled ministers. But his power came not only from what he said, but from what he refused to do. He rejected offers of power, turned down positions that could compromise his independence, and refused to budge on his principles. Critics called him stubborn. His supporters called him le Incorruptible, the Incorruptible. He warned against trusting monarchy, half measures, or slowing reform. He had become a dominant speaker in the Jacobin Club, and on March 31st, he was elected president of the club. He championed the voiceless, those without property, education, or the right to vote, calling for universal male suffrage, price controls, and protections for civil liberties. His influence had fully spread into working-class Paris. In April, radicals like Danton and Desmoulins formed the populist Cordelier Club. But Robespierre declined, insisting the National Assembly should lead. On July 14th, the Fete De La Federation celebrated the storming of the Bastille, the revolution, and a new sense of unity. The Bishop of Autun, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand Périgord, led the Mass, and Louis XVI pledged to uphold a new constitution. Lafayette and the moderates cheered, but Robespierre stood silent. To him, this was an illusion. It was either king or liberty, and one would have to go. He made a defining decision. He refused to accept any post in the new government, opting instead to remain in the assembly, making his integrity and image as the Incorruptible burn brighter. That August, a 23-year-old admirer wrote to him Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just, a name that would soon become inseparable from his own. But behind the purity, a transformation had begun. The man who once preached tolerance now viewed dissent as a threat. The seeds of terror were being sown. On the night of June 20th, 1791, King Louis XVI and his family attempted to flee France. Disguised and traveling under false names, they were arrested near the town of Varennes, just miles from the border. The royal family were returned to Paris and confined to the Tuileries Palace. On June 25th, the National Assembly suspended Louis XVI from all duties. To Robespierre, the betrayal was final. While moderates like Lafayette insisted on salvaging a limited monarchy, claiming Louis had been kidnapped, Robespierre declared it plainly. A king who fled his people had abdicated his moral right to rule. But he was not yet the singular dominant voice. In the revolutionary scene, others still held influence. Danton, thunderous and bold; Desmoulins, the firebrand journalist; Jean-Paul Marat, paranoid, prophetic, beloved by the mob; and Lafayette, still trusted by many. That summer, as the divide widened, the revolution stood at a crossroads. On July 17th, 1791, Danton, Desmoulins, and the Cordeliers led a mob of nearly 50,000 to the Champ de Mars, demanding the king's abdication. Robespierre initially backed the movement, but decided to pull his support. The Assembly declared martial law. Lafayette and the National Guard were dispatched to restore order, but without warning, the guards opened fire. Dozens of protesters were killed. Robespierre condemned the bloodshed and the moderates who enabled it. For him, the line had been crossed. The monarchy had fled. The moderates had fired on the people. There would be no more compromise. On September 3rd, 1791, the long-awaited constitution was ratified, establishing a constitutional monarchy with Louis XVI as king. The Feuillants, moderate revolutionaries, hailed it as a victory. But to Robespierre, it was betrayal wrapped in parchment. At the Jacobin Club, Robespierre warned of conspiracies, demanded vigilance, and called for the rooting out of traitors, not only in courtrooms, but in cafes, salons, and printing presses. His speeches grew darker. He began to speak of moral purity, of the need for virtue to guide the Republic. France, he argued, could not be preserved with half measures. It needed transformation, not treaties. To the people, he was a prophet of the revolution. To his enemies, a fanatic. In late 1791, France teetered between reform and bloodshed, and Robespierre was ready to tip the scale. France's revolution spread panic across Europe. Fearing similar uprisings on August 27, 1791, Austria and Prussia issued the Declaration of Pillnitz, warning that they would invade if Louis XVI was harmed. In Paris, the Girondins, moderates like Jacques Brissot, pushed for war. They claimed war would unite France, root out traitors, and spread liberty across Europe. Even Danton roared for war, and Desmoulins leaned toward it. Robespierre stood alone. He warned that war would only benefit aristocrats and counter-revolutionaries. The generals, he said, were royalists, waiting to seize power. France's enemies weren't across borders, they were within. He was jeered, called a coward, labeled a traitor, but he didn't waver. He declared, "The internal enemy is more dangerous than the foreign one." Despite his best efforts, in April 1792, France declared war on Austria. Robespierre's prophecy came true. The war was a catastrophe. The French troops were ill-equipped and poorly trained. Many soldiers fled or deserted. The army disintegrated. Panic swept Paris. Robespierre's warnings began to feel like prophecy. He accused Lafayette of planning a dictatorship, denounced the Girondins for gambling with France's survival, and warned that the revolution would not survive without internal purification. He began pushing for a different kind of war, not against foreign kings, but against internal enemies, royalists, moderates, corrupt officials. He no longer believed France could survive with half measures. The revolution had to be total, or it would be destroyed. He demanded tribunals to try those who betrayed the people's trust. The line between opposition and treason was starting to blur, and as the war raged abroad, Robespierre turned his full attention inward, toward Paris, where the people were growing restless and hungry. The storm was coming. By the summer of 1792, France was tearing apart. The war with Austria was a disaster, and fear reigned. In the assembly, tempers flared. In the streets, they exploded. Into this chaos stepped the sans-culottes, the laborers and artisans who had long supported the revolution. Now they demanded more. Robespierre had become their voice, delivering fiery speeches at the Jacobins' Club, condemning the Assembly's failures, the generals' betrayals, and the king's duplicity. He called for the creation of a government elected by the people, accountable to no monarch. Then came the Brunswick Manifesto. The Duke of Brunswick, commanding the Prussian army, threatened to level Paris if King Louis XVI or his family were harmed. Intended to protect the monarchy, it had the opposite effect. The storm finally broke. On August 10th, 1792, 30,000 National Guardsmen and armed citizens stormed the Tuileries Palace. The Swiss guards protecting the royal family were slaughtered, and the king and his family barely escaped with their lives, taking shelter with the Legislative Assembly, now as prisoners. The monarchy, once unshakable, was finished. The Assembly suspended all royal powers. On August 16th, Robespierre was appointed to the Paris Commune, the city's municipal government. With the monarchy suspended, Robespierre pushed for the next step, a new national convention, elected by universal male suffrage. The Marquis de Lafayette, once hailed as the revolution's savior, denounced the radical turn and fled the country. Desmoulins and others hoped that this was the end of the turmoil, but Robespierre, who had long opposed violence, now embraced it as a necessary tool of justice. The revolution could no longer afford sentiment. The guillotine would speak. That September, elections were held for the National Convention. Robespierre was elected as first deputy for Paris and was joined by many of his fellow revolutionaries, including Danton, Brissot, Marat, Desmoulins, his brother Augustin, Georges Couthon, Philippe François, Joseph Lebas, Paul Barras, and Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just, a former National Guardsman and brilliant orator who became a fervent supporter of Robespierre. On September 21st, the convention abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic, transforming Robespierre into one of its most powerful figures. The pressing question, what to do with Louis XVI? Robespierre answered without hesitation, "Louis must die, so that the nation may live." This was no longer the provincial lawyer who once opposed the death penalty. He now embraced it as essential to the Republic's survival. The convention fractured into two main factions, the Girondins, or moderates, who called for clemency or exile, and the Montagnards, or the Mountain, led by Robespierre and Danton, named for the high benches they occupied in the hall, who demanded execution. While some advocated a public trial, Robespierre dismissed it as needless theatre. To him, the king's guilt was self-evident, but the trial went forward. And it was not just about justice, it was a test of revolutionary will. On December 3rd, 1792, Louis XVI, now citizen Louis Capet, was placed on trial before the National Convention. Over several weeks, damning evidence was presented. Secret correspondence with foreign powers, his failed escape, and a hidden safe of documents exposing his deceit. On January 15th, 1793, the convention overwhelmingly jury declared him guilty. After 37 hours of debate, on January 17th, they sentenced him to death. On January 21st, Louis XVI was led to the scaffold in the Place de la Révolution. A hush fell over the crowd. The blade fell, his head was raised. Some cheered, others wept. Robespierre did neither. The revolution had passed the point of no return. With the monarchy extinguished, the stakes rose. Foreign monarchs prepared for war. Royalist revolts flared across France. And inside the convention, factions turned on each other like wolves in a pit. Robespierre had crossed the Rubicon. He had helped kill a king, and it changed him. He grew grimmer, more resolute, more paranoid, more devoted to rooting out corruption, dissent, and even hesitation. The guillotine had spoken, and it would not stay silent. By spring 1793, the guillotine had claimed a king, but the crown's fall only deepened the chaos. War expanded. Austria, Prussia, Britain and Spain all joined the fight. Uprisings erupted across France in Vendée, Lyon and Marseille. The economy plummeted and civil order teetered on the edge of total collapse. The revolution turned to emergency measures. On April 6th, the National Convention created the Committee of Public Safety, an executive council led by Danton and charged with defending the Republic from enemies both foreign and domestic by any means necessary. Robespierre was skeptical of centralized power and stayed on the sidelines. The Girondins, moderates long at odds with Robespierre's faction, were losing public favor. Meanwhile, the Montagnards, the mountain, named for the high benches they occupied in the convention hall, rose in influence. Led by radicals like Robespierre, Danton, Saint-Just, and Couthon, they saw themselves as guardians of the revolution, willing to do whatever was necessary to save it. By late May, the struggle came to a head. Backed by the Paris Commune, Robespierre demanded the arrest of the leading Girondins. On June 2nd, the convention gave in, and 29 Girondin deputies were arrested. With the Girondins purged, Robespierre made his move. On July 27th, 1793, he joined the Committee of Public Safety and quickly became its dominant force. He was soon joined by his brother Augustin, Couthon, a ruthless ally despite his paralysis, and Saint-Just, his fervent supporter and soon-to-be right-hand man. Together, they formed the ideological core of what would become known as the Reign of Terror. Their goal was to stabilize France, but their methods were swift and brutal. They passed emergency laws, censored newspapers, fixed bread prices, and dispatched representatives to the provinces to crush counter-revolution. Robespierre spoke of a republic built on virtue, where justice was swift, the law was sacred, and the people were sovereign. He believed France stood at the crossroads of salvation or collapse, and that virtue required violence. To save the republic, they believed, it had to be purified. First, they would eliminate the last vestige of the monarchy. The Reign of Terror had begun. 9 months after the death of Louis XVI, the guillotine came for the monarchy's last symbol. Marie Antoinette, once the most reviled woman in France, once draped in diamonds and disdain, stood before the Revolutionary Tribunal in October 1793. Her appearance shocked the crowd. Gaunt, grey-haired, eyes hollowed by months of imprisonment and grief. Her husband had been killed, and her children had been taken from her. She was charged with treason, depletion of the treasury, and, most cruelly, incest with her son. She refused to answer the last accusation. Even her enemies fell silent at her dignity. The trial was a formality, the verdict inevitable. On October 16, 1793, Marie Antoinette was paraded through Paris in a common tumbril, her white dress soaked in morning rain. She stumbled on the scaffold, stepped on the executioner's foot, and famously apologized. "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose." Then the blade fell. There were no cheers, only silence. The revolution had claimed its queen, but this was not a climax, it was a warning. The monarchy was dead, but the bloodshed was just beginning. The guillotine would not stop at royals. It would turn inward toward allies, friends, and anyone who dared hesitate. And Robespierre, who once decried bloodshed, would become its architect. With the monarchy gone, the revolution turned inward. Its enemy was now the enemy within. Robespierre, entrenched in the Committee of Public Safety, led a republic under siege. The economy collapsed, rebellions flared, and foreign armies closed in. For Robespierre, there was no room for compromise, only purification. In October 1793, a state of emergency was declared. Civil liberties were suspended. The law of suspects unleashed mass arrests and executions. The guillotine became a daily ritual. On October 31st, 21 Girondin deputies, opponents of Robespierre's vision, were executed. The reign of terror had begun. Robespierre defended the bloodshed as essential justice. Terror is nothing but prompt, severe, inflexible justice. It is an emanation of virtue. His allies on the committee, Saint-Just, the angel of death, the ruthless Couthon, and his loyal brother Augustin, oversaw rapid tribunals. Across France, thousands were imprisoned, purged, or executed. Privately, Robespierre grew distant, isolated, and paranoid. He withdrew from the Jacobin Club, trusting only his inner circle. By winter 1793, even his allies feared him. No one knew who might be next. The terror deepened. In March 1794, he ordered the execution of Jacques Hébert, the ultra-radical whom he deemed too reckless. Georges Danton, once Robespierre's ally, Camille Desmoulins, Robespierre's childhood friend, begged him in print to stop the killing. He never named Robespierre, but the message was clear. Robespierre warned Camille, "Your pen will destroy you." Camille didn't stop. In April, Danton and Desmoulins were arrested. The charges were vague. The verdict was inevitable. Danton met the scaffold defiant. "My only regret is that I'm going before that rat Robespierre." Desmoulins was dragged there, screaming for his wife. Robespierre had killed his closest friends. He had silenced the revolution's conscience. Now, only the loyal remained. In the Jacobins' once vibrant halls, doubt became treason, mercy, weakness. As Saint-Just declared, "You have to punish not only traitors, but the indifferent." The revolution had been purified, but Robespierre had destroyed its soul, and the people began to whisper, if Danton and Desmoulins could die, who was next? Amidst the chaos, a moment of light. In December 1793, French forces retook Toulon. Augustin Robespierre, impressed by a young Corsican artillery officer named Napoleon Bonaparte, helped secure his promotion. A passing moment, but history would remember it. On February 4th, 1794, at Maximilien Robespierre's urging, the National Convention abolished slavery in all French colonies. The decree was sweeping and radical. The first time a European power legally ended slavery in its overseas possessions. Robespierre declared that the Republic must not be built on chains. Liberty, he insisted, must be universal, or it was a lie. But the move was not purely moral. France was losing control of its colonies, especially Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, where a massive slave revolt had erupted in 1791. The decree was also strategic, an attempt to win the loyalty of black revolutionaries against foreign enemies like Britain and Spain. Still, the moment mattered. In a Europe that still trafficked in human lives, France, at least on paper, declared that all men were born free. But as Robespierre freed the enslaved abroad, he tightened his grip on liberty at home. The guillotine remained busy. Fear had become institutional. No one was safe. With the church dismantled and Christianity replaced by civic festivals and revolutionary calendars, France had become a spiritual void. Robespierre sought to fill it with faith in virtue. He despised atheism. To him, liberty without morality was a sword with no hilt. The revolution, he insisted, needed something higher, something pure to justify its blood and sacrifice. In May 1794, he proposed a new state religion, the cult of the Supreme Being. Its aim was to unite the Republic through civic faith, not with saints or saviors, but with reason, nature, and a distant deistic Supreme Being. On June 8, 1794, 20 Prairial in the revolutionary calendar, Robespierre presided over its inaugural festival. Dressed in a sky blue coat, he descended an artificial mountain in the Champ de Mars, delivering lofty orations before thousands. Musicians played, children scattered flowers. It was meant to inspire, but many found it unnerving. Deputies whispered that Robespierre had crowned himself a prophet, or worse, a god. Even his allies squirmed. Saint-Just, Lebas, and Augustin stood by him, but others, like Joseph Fouché and Jean-Lambert Tallien, began to plot. Paul Barras, cold and calculating, started meeting privately with dissenters. It was not a moment of unity. It was a warning. Behind the flowers and fanfare, the executions only accelerated. The weeks around the festival were the bloodiest of the Terror. Every day, carts rattled through Paris carrying the accused, some guilty, many not, to the guillotine. Robespierre preached that terror was a tool to protect liberty, but by now, liberty was ornamental, terror was permanent. The cult of the supreme being was meant to elevate the Republic's soul. Instead, it alienated Robespierre from it. The Incorruptible had climbed a mountain, not to lead the people, but to rise above them. And in doing so, he stepped closer to the edge. By summer 1794, Robespierre had conquered every enemy, from royalists to close friends, but had alienated nearly everyone. Only shadows remained at his side. On 22nd Prairial, June 10th, Couthon's law of 22nd Prairial intensified the terror. Once accused, it was acquittal or death. No defense, no witnesses, no mercy. The guillotine and the streets ran red. By July, Paris was drowning in fear. The guillotine spared no one. Loyal Jacobins, Montagnards, and ordinary citizens condemned by rumor, envy, or silence. Behind closed doors, a coalition formed. Moderates, radicals, and opportunists, men who now feared Robespierre more than each other. Among them, Barras, Fouché, Tallien, and even members of the committee itself. They had once bowed to him. Now they plotted his downfall. Robespierre had disappeared from the convention for weeks. When he returned on July 26th, 8th Thermidor, he delivered a thunderous speech denouncing treachery in the highest offices, calling for a renewal of the revolution and vaguely threatening another purge. He did not name names. That was his fatal mistake. By not accusing anyone specifically, he made everyone feel targeted. Panic gripped the convention. That night, Barras and his allies made their move. On 9 Thermidor, July 27th, the trap was set. As Robespierre rose to speak, Tallien, white-faced and trembling, demanded his arrest. They shouted, "Down with the tyrant! The blood of Danton chokes him!" Robespierre tried to speak. "Is it Danton you regret? Cowards! Why didn't you defend him? President of the People's Convention, I demand to be heard!" But his voice was drowned by shouts and pounding fists. He was arrested. Augustin, Couthon, Saint-Just, and Lebas demanded to share his fate and were seized across the city. Robespierre was taken to Luxembourg prison, but no jailer dared keep him. One by one, the prisons refused. By nightfall, he and his loyalists regrouped at the Hôtel de Ville, the final refuge of the Paris Commune. They tried to rally the people. No one came. The city was exhausted, disillusioned. At 2 a.m., Paul Barras and grenadiers of the National Guard stormed the Hôtel de Ville. The reign of terror would end today. Paris, 10 Thermidor, Year 2, July 28th, 1794, Hôtel de Ville. Just after 2 a.m., a storm rages. Inside the Hôtel de Ville, the heart of the Jacobins nears its final chapter. Once leaders of the revolution, they have been declared outlaws. And at the center of it all, slumped in his chair, exhausted, and his voice ragged from his desperate pleas to the members of the committee, sits Maximilien Robespierre, once feared, once revered, now vilified and disgraced. Lebas pulls out 2 pistols. He hands one silently to Robespierre. Downstairs, men are shouting and charging up the stairs. The door crashes open. Paul Barras and his grenadiers have arrived. Augustine throws open a window. "I'd rather die than be taken," then leaps into the dark. Lebas turns his pistol on himself and pulls the trigger. Saint-Just remains unfazed. Couthon begins to crawl, dragging himself toward the stairs. Robespierre raises the pistol, aims it at his own mouth. A grenadier lunges to stop him. But it did not kill him. The bullet shattered his jaw. He reeled backward in mute agony. Blood soaked his cravat. His once commanding face was a ruin. The executioner of kings, the guardian of virtue, the man who sent thousands to the guillotine, now a broken wreck, wincing in silence. Saint-Just surrendered without a word. Augustin had fractured his pelvis. Couthon was found at the bottom of the stairs with a head injury. Barras, in a calculated gesture, ordered their transport to the nearest hospital. But Robespierre, the Incorruptible, would find no mercy from Barras. He was at the mercy of the Supreme Being. Barras ordered his grenadiers to bring Robespierre to the antechamber of the Committee of General Security. He was placed on a table, bleeding, ignored, and half-conscious. Around 10 a.m., a doctor cleaned him up. After removing some teeth and jawbone fragments, what was left of Robespierre's jaw was bandaged, and he was transferred to a cell in the Conciergerie courthouse. By 2 p.m., Robespierre, Augustin, Couthon, Saint-Just, and 18 other Robespierrists were paraded before the Revolutionary Tribunal. Maximilien lay in agony, jaw shattered, face wrapped in blood-soaked linen. Once known as the Incorruptible, the Grand Master of Oratory had been silenced. The man who was the voice of the revolution could no longer speak. There would be no trial, no defense. All 22 men were condemned to death. Ironically, it was Couthon's law of 22 Prairial, designed to swiftly eliminate enemies of the revolution, that sealed their fate. Robespierre and his followers were loaded into 3 carts, the same carts that had once carried their enemies. As they paraded through Paris, they were met with jeers, thrown refuse, and cold stares. Couthon's legs were tied to keep him upright. Saint-Just sat in stoic silence. Augustin lay at the bottom, broken and half-conscious, and Maximilien, half dead, mute, staring blankly, rode on, a living ghost in the city he once ruled through fear. They reached the Place de la Révolution, where a massive crowd hurled insults at the leaders of the Terror. One by one, Robespierre's allies were led to the guillotine. Couthon screamed until the blade silenced him. Saint-Just approached quietly, his head held high, the only one able to walk on his own. When Robespierre was lifted from the cart, the crowd gasped, not in pity, but in shock. Bloodied and bandaged, his jaw barely held together, his hollow eyes reflected something darker than pain, awful realization. When the executioner ripped the bandage off his face, Robespierre let out a blood-curdling, agonizing scream that silenced the crowd. At 6:15 p.m., the blade fell. The crowd erupted, not in mourning, but in thunderous celebration. For 15 minutes, Paris roared. The Terror was over. Maximilien Robespierre began as a man of principle, driven by justice, armed with unwavering conviction, and inspired by Enlightenment ideals. He became the voice of the voiceless. He spoke of liberty, of virtue, of justice, and in his voice, a revolution found its savior, the Incorruptible, a man who couldn't be bought or silenced. But revolutions are not built on ideals alone. They are forged in blood. Robespierre came to believe that violence was not the enemy of virtue, but its guardian, and the guillotine its instrument. To purify the Republic, its enemies, real or imagined, had to perish. The lawyer who once defended the powerless became the judge, jury, and executioner, toppled the monarchy, and unleashed a reign of terror, sending thousands, including his closest friends, to their deaths. In his quest to liberate the people, he became a tyrant, a man who became everything he swore to destroy. Maximilien Robespierre, the architect of terror. As always, don't forget to like and hit that subscribe button. Your support helps this channel grow, allowing us to bring you even more incredible stories. If you enjoyed this video, we release new episodes frequently, so click the bell icon so you never miss a future video. This is UnRecalled History. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.